Hey everyone, I hope you are doing well. We are continuing the journey in looking at 4th edition as though it was just released or is the new edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Last week I spent a few videos, I can't remember how many it was, looking at Keep on the Shadowfell, which was the first 4th edition product that was released. It was essentially the starter set for 4th edition. It wasn't the first thing released for 4th edition. The Wizards Presents books had been released a few months earlier, and they give a glimpse of the artwork and some of the design theories that they were using to help put 4th edition together, where they were coming from, how they worked through some of their challenges and all that. Really good books. I'll probably dig into those again in the future. But Keep on the Shadowfell was the first book that was released with actual 4th edition rules and mechanics and characters. And so it was the first taste of everything. I think it was a really good release. People can say what they want about the adventure, but as a starter set, I think it was really good. It covered everything that you would need. And it's free. If you want to go to DriveThruRPG, it is free to download the PDFs of it, including all the maps. So highly recommend it. I will probably spend some more time looking at Keep on the Shadowfell because there's a lot there. And I would like to dig into some of the encounters in a little more detail and provide some other tips on those and even look at some of the characters and things. But I'm anxious to move forward into the next phase of this project that we're doing. And I want to look at the core rulebooks. So about a month after Keep on the Shadowfell was released, on June 6th of 2008, Wizards released all 3 of the core rulebooks. So there wasn't the staggered release that we've seen lately. All the books came out on the same day. The Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster Manual, all on the same day. Now, I am not going to go through all of those books in this video. I get really excited when I start talking about these, and I'm tempted to say, oh, let me make a video about the Player's Handbook, and then I just want to go through and do the whole thing. And that would not do it justice because there's so much stuff in each one of these books that if I was to try to do that, I would end up glossing over something, or the video would be 5 hours long, and nobody would want to watch that. So I think what I want to do is I'm gonna break it up into chunks, and we'll basically kind of go chapter by chapter. And I'll probably I'll do the player some like for the Player's Handbook, and then I'll look at the Dungeon Master's Guide. We'll do something like that. So you don't have to wait for me to finish one book before we go to the next. But that's my take on this. Is I'm gonna look at the chapter by chapter, maybe section by section, because like when I think about the classes in the Player's Handbook, I'm not going to cover all the classes in one video. I think it makes more sense to dig into each class, look at what they have, look at their powers, look at some of the nuances of Paragon tier and Epic tier, all those sorts of things. And I'm really excited to get into and look at that. So, but in this video, I kind of more want to just give the overview. So imagine, the books have hit the shelves, and you've gone down to the game store or the bookstore, and you've picked them all up, and what are you going to see from these books, and just kind of take a peek at them. I will look at like the first chapter of the Player's Handbook because it's just kind of an introductory one. So we'll do that. But let's dig into it and see what we have here. So I'll flip over to my other screen here. So this is the actual books themselves, and this is my first Player's Handbook that I got when a couple months. I had first gotten the red box starter set was where I started with things, and I had to make do with making characters just from the red box starter set for a while, which was the essentials rules, and it was very streamlined. And you didn't get all the classes, you didn't get all the races, so you're kind of but I was still having a lot of fun with it. Finally saved up the money to get a Player's Handbook, and man, I was so super excited when I got this book, because there was so much in here, and I was just reading this thing all the time and making tons of characters. So this is well used, but this book is now 13 years old, and it is in pretty good shape, actually. I was thinking about the fact that I had a 5th edition Player's Handbook that after about 6 or 7 years, it completely fell apart, and I had to get another one. So whereas this book is still in really good condition, I have multiple copies of the Player's Handbook, but that's just because I want multiple copies, not because there's anything wrong with this one. It's holding up very well. So but just the books themselves, Player's Handbook is, I have my notes, 317 pages. Dungeon Master's Guide is 219 pages, and the Monster Manual is 287 pages. The list price on the back of the book on each book is $34.95 in the US. I went and did the math. If that was in 2008, by comparison, if adjusting for inflation, that works out to be $52.36 in 2025. Since the core rulebooks for 5th edition 2024 and for Pathfinder 2nd edition are currently listed at $59.99, I'd say that these are right on par with what you would be paying for books for a role-playing game back in 2008. So I don't think there's any sort of sticker shock that would have come with these. I know some people were saying that about Keep on the Shadowfell. Maybe there was a little bit that because that was $29. But these are priced right about, I think, what they should have been for that time. Do you want to highlight, and I'll show it off a little better. I love the cover of the Dungeon Master's Guide. I know my camera's a little blurry. I'll flip it over to the PDF so you can see it a little better. But the fact that the orb that the Red Dragon is looking at in the Dungeon Master's Guide is the cover of the player's handbook, which I just think is I wish they had done that more. It's like interesting that this is the only one where they really did that, but it's I love that cover. It's one of my favorites. So that's the books themselves. I'm not gonna burden you with seeing these on the camera here because I know that it's blurry. I'm gonna flip over to the PDFs so that we can look at them that way, which would be much easier on everybody's eyes. So we will start with the monster manual. The monster manual on the back cover, it says that it has nearly 500 monsters. If you look at the table of contents, you will see that there are 274 different types of monsters. I went through and did the math, and there are 499 monsters by my count. So there's multiples. So you don't have just a goblin, you have several different goblins. And so when you add up all the different monsters that they have a stat block in here, it's 499. So I feel like they maybe could have squeezed one more in to get it to actually 500, but they got 499, and then on the back cover it says they have nearly 500, so that's about as close as you can get. The interesting thing for me is that there's not a lot of dragons in this. I know that they planned to have the 2 dragon books that they released, the chromatic and the metallic dragon books. So naturally they were planning on having those books so that they didn't have a lot of dragons in the monster manual here, which is a little disappointing. Obviously with a game called Dungeons and Dragons, you'd think they'd have dragons, but there's something to be aware of. The nice thing in when you first get into the book is you see that it goes into the stat block in great detail. So you've got this wonderful monster stat block that says everything that the monster can do, and it gives you an example one and then goes through field by field every single thing that the monster can do and explains what that field means, how to interpret the different things. For the attack powers, it shows you what all the different things are that it means. Really, really great that they spell it all out for you. And so if you're curious ever while you're working with a monster what a keyword means or what you're supposed to do in a certain situation, you can come right back here and find it right in these first couple pages. So really good stuff. I am not gonna dip into all of the monsters, so I'll just give a peek there, but that's kind of as far as I'm going to take it. I will do another video. I'm not sure exactly how to do the videos on the monsters because there's so many of them, but if anybody has any thoughts on how you would like to see the monsters in the monster manual, how we want to look through that book, love to see that in the comments because I'm not really sure how to approach it myself. But if we flip over to the Dungeon Master's Guide, anyone that has watched my videos will know that I think this is one of the best Dungeon Master's Guide for any edition of Dungeons and Dragons, possibly for any role-playing game, because it's got so much stuff in it that is not specific to 4th edition. You can use a lot of these things and just strip out some of the 4th edition mechanics, and the guidance that it provides is really, really good. But just giving a quick glimpse of it, if you're brand new to 4th edition, or coming from 3rd edition or never played the game before, you can see that this book is going to give you exactly what you need. What's the first question you're going to ask? Oh, how do I be a dungeon master? Well, there it is, chapter 1. You're going to get about 10 pages about how to be a dungeon master. And then it's going to go through how to run the game. It's going to talk about how to run combat encounters. And then the thing that I know a lot of folks are looking forward to, and I'm really looking forward to, getting to the point where we talk about how to build an encounter and see some of this 4th edition math and how great it is for choosing your monsters that are going to go in the encounter. It's got a whole section about building encounters. What is it? 15 pages worth of things about setting up your encounters and things beyond just the monsters, but things that you want to do to make your encounters interesting. So really good stuff there. Then we get non-combat encounters, and it talks about these skill challenges. So you're coming from an older edition of the game. game or you're brand new, and he's like, skill challenge, what's that? That'll be interesting to dig into. Obviously, skill challenges are something that these days has a lot of stigma attached to it. You either love them or you hate them. I have mixed feelings on depending on how they're run. I like the idea of them. Sometimes the implementation is not that great. But anyway, we will spend some time looking at skill challenges, but it also covers puzzles and traps and hazards, which I think the way that they handle puzzles and traps and hazards, really good in 4th edition. Adventures talks about some stuff about published adventures and putting together your own adventures, rewards, campaigns, the world itself, where you got a lot of the stuff about civilizations and the planes and things like that. So I like this progression that you're going from, how do I be how to DM, how what do I need to do to be a dungeon master? I don't know. And you by the time you get through this, you've worked your way up to the world, and you're talking about the planes and the gods and artifacts. That's how a dungeon master's guide should be. It should really walk you through from those beginning steps all the way through into the more advanced things. And you don't need this later stuff. The stuff you need is in the early chapters. By the time you get here, you've already covered how to build campaigns and adventures and encounters. And so this is the advanced stuff. That's the way it should be. And then the last chapter is, not the last chapter, second to last is the Dungeon Master's Toolbox. Really good stuff about how to build NPCs, how to customize the monsters for your own purposes, how to make some random dungeons, random encounters. So again, more tools to help the Dungeon Master. Everything in here is about helping the Dungeon Master. And the last little bit gives us our glimpse of the Nintervale. We got a little bit in Keep on the Shadowfell, but we didn't get the map of the whole place. And in this one digs into the town of Fallcrest in particular. And you get a little bit of a quest that's got, just a handful of encounters in there. But nice that you actually get an encounter that you can then apply some of the things you've learned in this Dungeon Master's Guide into some encounters here. There's a thing on combat cards. I think I made a video on the combat cards a while ago, but we'll definitely dig back into those and talk about that. So that's the Dungeon Master's Guide. But the one that we'll look at, just the beginning of it here, is the Player's Handbook. So let's take a look at the Player's Handbook. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole Player's Handbook. We're just going to take a glimpse at it, and we'll look at the first chapter because it has some repetitive stuff from that we've already covered, and so we don't need to have a whole video just dedicated to that. But so let's look at the table of contents, and for the Player's Handbook, again, I loved this book when I got it. This was my first D&D rule book, because the starter set is not really the rule book. It's just something to get you started. The Player's Handbook is the one that I started with. Most people probably start with that as their first rule book, and it just has everything that you would want to get you into this game and get excited about this game. If you're coming from a previous edition of the game, then there's a couple things that might jump out at you. One is the fact that there are magic items in here. So if you look in Chapter 7, there's a whole bunch of pages on magic items. It's like 32 pages worth of magic items. Magic items are not typically something that were in the Player's Handbook. You would usually have them in the Dungeon Master's Guide, because the Dungeon Master is the one that's handing out the magic items. But so the fact that they moved into the Player's Handbook for 4th edition might have been a little bit of a shock, and they've since moved back into the Dungeon Master's Guide in the later editions. So that might jump out at you. You might also notice that when you look at the character classes, you see that there's quite a few pages for each class. Cleric has 15 pages, Paladin has 11 pages. So everyone's got about 10 to 15 pages for every single class here. You don't generally need that much space to cover every class. So the question that you might be asking is, why is there so many pages on each class? We know now in hindsight, it's like, because there's all these powers. Yeah, you have a lot of powers to choose from. You have also, then you get up to these, you see references to Paragon Paths and then Epic Destinies. All of these things are contained, within the class section, and really help you to make pretty awesome characters that don't just simply level up, but do special things when they reach these other milestones. So that's pretty interesting. And the other thing that, going back to my last video that I talked about, was the fact that I was talking about how when it comes to the rules, if you're looking to get into the game, you can just ignore most of the rules. The quick start guide that came with Keep on the Shadowfell, it had 4.5 pages of rules, and I kind of broke that down to say, look, there's really about 4 things you need to know in order to start playing the game, and you can just ignore the rest of it, and you'll figure it out as you go. And then as you learn those things, the game will get better and better and better as you learn all the nuances of how to play the game. I still stand by that, and I stand by that even from the player's handbook perspective. But just keep in mind that the player's handbook, when it gets to the section about playing the game, which is really chapter 9, you can notice that there are 31 pages about playing the game. It talks about combat, just setting up the combat sequences. It talks about the types of attacks that you can make, your different modifiers that you can use, your movement and positioning yourself on the battlefield, different things like flanking and teleportation and phasing, all the different actions that you can take, how to heal, what to do if you get to 0 hit points and your character is dying. All of everything. So it covers all the things. And 31 pages. The quick start guide had 4.5. This one has 31. I still will say that you don't need to know all of them. By no means, don't think that you got to memorize 31 pages of rules in order to play this game. There's the core set of things you got to do. The core mechanic, and then you just figure out the rest as you go. And as you learn that, the game will just get more and more enjoyable because you'll be able to take advantage of all the little details. So and that's kind of that's what you got. And there's a lot here, and we're going to go through all of it. I'm not going to really go in order though, because I want to save making a character, I think, towards at least get past the equipment section, because we've got to pick out, we got to understand the races and the classes and the powers and the feats and all that sort of stuff before we can really create the characters. Because if we don't understand what those things are, then we're not really making informed decisions about the character. So I will, when we get to that part, I will probably, my next video will probably be more focused on the races, and then we'll start looking at classes and the other things, and we'll circle back to making a character a little after we understand those things a little better. So with that, I do want to take a peek. The last thing I want to do on this video is take a look at the first chapter here. And this is how to play the game. And so if you are brand new to Dungeons and Dragons, well, this is the question you're going to ask. How do I play Dungeons and Dragons? If you're coming from an older edition of the game, then your question is going to be, how do I play 4th edition of Dungeons and Dragons? So this is the place to go. It's right there, first chapter, and it's going to take you through it. Gives you a good overview of what a role-playing game is and about the world that you're going to be playing in. You get a little bit of history of Dungeons and Dragons itself if you want to read about that. And then you get some of the real important stuff. What does a player do? What is a dungeon master? How does this game work? Where do you get adventures? How do you know what you're actually going to play? Where you keep hearing about encounters and things. Where do they come from? What do you need to play? You need dice, you need pencils, you need character sheets, things like that. And so that's what's covered out here. You get a nice, look at all the game dice. This is relatively standard stuff. This isn't groundbreaking. Like, wow, 4th edition really set the stage here, set the standard. You get these in other games as well, but it is here, just as you would expect for a game. And somebody coming from a previous edition of this game, this would be remedial, because all of these things are the same in all of those editions of the game. There's nothing really new here in 4th edition. Maybe some of the small details in here, but if you're coming from a previous edition of the game, all this will be familiar. If you're brand new to the game, then this spells it out very nicely for you so that you can understand what it is you're going to do. The next part, we start getting into some of the stuff we already saw in those quick start rules. So the how do you play, it talks about combat encounters, it talks about non-combat encounters, and has a little more about exploration than what we saw in that. So it goes into some details about some specific things you could do while you're exploring. And if I want to put on my D&D 4th edition apologist hat, you'll notice that there's like 2 sentences that talk about combat, and then it jumps right into non-combat and exploration, and has almost half a page talking about non-combat. So just, I don't know, I mentioned that for no reason whatsoever. And then you get into how do you take your turn. There's an example play here, which is an awkwardly worded kind of dialogue between a dungeon master and some players about how a turn would go down. It's fine. It's great for somebody who is brand new. I do know that for myself, when I had not really played Dungeons and Dragons and I picked up the player's handbook, I had already had the starter set, so I was doing some stuff. But this type of stuff does help because, you know, one of the problems you have as a new group of players is that you're sitting around a table and the dungeon master presents a situation and the players are like, they don't know what to do. It's not like a board game where it's like, okay, you just do a thing. You know what you're supposed to do. It's like when you're in a room and it's dripping with water, it has a musty smell to it, and there's a light shining from a small crack on the wall on the far side, and the dungeon master stops talking. You don't know as a player what you really should do at that point, or what's possible to do. You don't quite get that anything is possible, that you can do anything, and the dungeon master will decide what you have to do to see if it succeeds. But these things of dialogue where it just kind of goes through that really helps a new player to understand some of that and maybe open their eyes to say, all right, well, let's try some different things. So, and then the last part here is the core mechanic, which is this is straight out of the quick start rules. If you looked at the quick start rules, you'll see the same thing. The formatting's a little different, but it is like word for word right out of those quick start rules. So that's nothing new there. And then of course you get a plug for D&D Insider, which would be coming, their online tools. And maybe we'll dig into those a little bit as best we can. But that is the first 8 pages of the player's handbook. So, we looked at the little bit of the monster manual, a little bit of the Dungeon Master's Guide, and then this first chapter of the player's handbook. And that I looked at the chapter because mostly that's one that probably doesn't warrant an entire video since we already did cover the quick start guide, but is something to get you started. We'll look in the future videos. We'll go into detail in each of these other chapters and talk through those things. But that's the core rule books, and they came out June 6, 2008. The 3 books all came out at the same time, and there's a lot to look at. Just thinking about, just myself, and all I had was the player's handbook. It was the first one I got, and I just, I'd spend every day reading through this book and making characters and mixing up the different characters and races and trying to pick out powers and what I would do. I never played most of those characters, but it was just so much fun to see all the nuance. Looking at all those magic items was great. And then eventually I got around to getting the Dungeon Master's Guide, and that just had a whole new set of things for me to look at. But so just imagine somebody who was, at the time went and picked up all 3 of these books, like information overload with the amount of stuff that you have to work with in these books. And so I'm super excited to start digging into these and go section by section and talk through them. So if there's some specific things you want to make sure I cover as I do these conversations, please do put those down in the comments and let me know what those things are, because I want to make sure I cover them and give everything its due and not gloss over anything. So definitely put those down in the comments. Love to hear what you have to say, and love to hear your experiences with these books when they were released, or when you first started looking through them. And if you're new to 4th edition or new to D&D and you've got some things you'd like me to try to cover and make sure I don't avoid or miss because of experience and I don't realize that it's a question someone's going to have, please do put those down in the comments as well, because I want to make sure that you're getting out of all this content everything that you can in order to play the game and enjoy the game as much as I do and as much as others in this community do. So, but that's it. Core rule books. We're going to get started. Can't wait to jump into them some more. Until next time, take care.